But before we start, can we get 1,000 likes for this video? Smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming stories. The sound that changed Joe's life was small but distinct, a bright hard tap beneath the dull scrape of metal on dirt. Initially, he didn't stop working. He was engrossed in the rhythmic task of preparing the field for planting. Under the oppressive heat of the sun, the field shimmered and dust hung in the air, creating an almost cruel scene. On his next swing, the metallic clink came again, higher and thinner than the sound of a rock or a buried bottle. Joe hesitated, feeling the day's fatigue in his legs and chest, and mentally reciting his list of tasks like a prayer. But the sound nagged at him, creating a space in his mind that demanded attention. Kneeling, he brushed the dirt aside with his hands, feeling the cool metal beneath the warm earth. He uncovered a round curved object, heavy in the ground, and eased it free. It emerged from the soil with a wet kiss, crusted and dark, but flashing in the sunlight. It was not a bowl or a bell, it was a helmet. The helmet was heavy, its surface grooved and cut, a weave of lines like rivers carved into hills. Joe's mouth went dry. He wanted to set it down, to cover it back up, to pretend he hadn't heard that small, fateful tap. Instead, he carried it to the shade and cleaned it with water and a rag, revealing intricate carvings, squares, twisted bands, spirals, and eyes, all forming a pattern that eluded him. The helmet was unlike anything Joe had seen in the local museum, which housed flint tools and old farm gear, nor did it resemble anything from war movies or football games. It was something else entirely. Joe considered calling his neighbor Hank, who had answers for most things, but this felt like a secret. He studied the field, the small hole he had left, and the soil that seemed resentful at being moved. The sun shifted, a warm breeze lifted his sweat, and he shivered. Picking up the helmet again, it caught the light, and the line seemed to move under his thumb, making him feel a little sick. Taking it inside, he set it on the kitchen table. In the quiet of the house, with a ceiling fan turning slowly and the refrigerator humming, the helmet seemed out of place, belonging to another world. Joe washed his hands, watching the grit come off in streams, and felt detached, as if watching someone else's hands. He cleaned the helmet further, revealing crisp, delicate, strange carvings. Some lines had tiny marks like stitches. Others had dots like seeds. Near the bottom, he found shapes that could have been animals or people, but they remained unclear. The helmet seemed seamless, of one body, yet layered with designs. Joe considered putting it on but dismissed the idea as heavy and wrong. He took a picture with his phone, but it failed to capture the helmet's complexity. He thought of the sheriff, the county museum, and the university, feeling caught between his age and the situation. He called the sheriff's office, speaking to the dispatcher and explaining he had found a helmet. Despite feeling foolish, he reported it, and she promised to send someone by. Expecting relief, he instead felt like he had invited strangers into his home and wanted to hide the helmet. A truck approached, and Deputy Jensen, whom Joe knew from school, stepped in. She looked at the helmet and let out a breath, acknowledging its significance with a polite exclamation. Joe nodded, feeling both dumb and proud. She circled the table, not touching it, and placed her hat under her arm, leaning in silently for a long time. Finally, she asked, "You find it in your field?" He nodded. "You think it's old?" she inquired. He replied, "I think it's strange." She decided to call in experts from the museum or the university since this was unusual. He nodded again, his throat dry. She stepped out to the porch for better cell service as he watched through the window, glancing back at the helmet, feeling like a dog with a bone in the living room. By evening, his driveway was filled with 2 cars and a van. The county museum director, Ruth, a thin woman with short gray hair and a cornstalk shirt, observed the helmet, taking notes. A man from the university, introduced as Dr. Patel but called Mira, arrived after dark. Mira, small and fast with flashing glasses, asked many questions before touching anything. He inquired about the exact location and depth of the find. Joe explained it was in row 6, near the elm with a broken branch, about a foot deep in hard-packed soil. They marked the spot with tape, and Ruth's tone changed as if the site was sacred. They placed the helmet into a padded crate lined with gray foam. Mira, using gloves and a scanning gun, examined the metal, frowning at the screen. He requested to take the helmet for the night, promising a chain of custody and a report. Joe felt a tug in his chest as the crate was sealed. "It came out of my field," he insisted. "It's mine." Ruth assured him it was his and they only wanted to care for it properly. Mira offered non-invasive analysis, no cutting or drilling, just examining with advanced tool. Joe agreed but insisted on its return. Mira promised to return it by morning or afternoon, offering to leave someone to watch the site, but Joe declined, asserting he could watch his land. They left, and the night descended quietly. Joe sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty space where the helmet had been. Despite wanting to sleep, he couldn't. He went to the porch, ran his finger along the wooden grain, snagged it on a splinter, and pulled away. The field's hole gaped in the starlight, and he stared until his eyes watered, annoyed by his fear of it. He slept in a chair, waking to a distant car door sound, his heart leaping. He listened as the sound receded, reminding himself to breathe. The next morning, a different van with an unfamiliar logo arrived, bearing 2 people with coffee and maps. By 9, more cars and trucks with equipment appeared. A canopy was set up over the hole, surrounded by tape and signs. Do not enter. Site under review. Authorized personnel only. Mira returned with a crate, looking as if he had slept in his clothes too. He opened the crate reverently, and the helmet looked both the same and different in the morning light. We ran a spectrometry, he explained. Preliminary results are interesting. Joe asked what that meant. Mira explained it didn't match any standard alloy, with unexpected elements like silicon, a non-ceramic binder, and possibly a polymer. We'll run it again, he said. Mira pointed out the helmet's carvings, noting non-repeating symmetries and patterns resembling but not matching known historical designs. It's like a language smoothie, he joked. Joe asked if it was old. Mira admitted that was the question, as there were no organic materials to date. They could analyze the surface patina, but that could be deceiving. Joe wondered if it was a prank, and Mira admitted he didn't understand how it could be made recently. By noon, a news van arrived. A reporter with careful hair and words stood in Joe's yard, announcing, "A Kansas farmer, Joe Huntington, has found what some experts call an astonishing artifact." She kindly omitted his middle name. Joe's life turned upside down when his phone buzzed with messages and calls, including from his sister and ex-wife, after his name appeared on TV. By evening, 2 federal agents visited him, offering vague information and compliments on his porch. That night, suspicious cars parked nearby, prompting Joe to call the sheriff, who managed to get them to leave. 2 days later, a corner of Joe's kitchen was transformed into a lab with restricted access requiring booties. Experts examined carvings, with a linguist finding them reminiscent of ancient scripts and a historian suggesting they were abstract ideas. Joe felt like an outsider in his home as people came and went, offering advice and support. Some townspeople urged him to sell the discovery, while others insisted it was his to keep. Pastor Luke reminded Joe to stay grounded, and a local boy's innocent admiration of the helmet provided some comfort. Rumors spread, with some attributing the find to aliens or historical events. Online, theories ranged from government conspiracies to supernatural phenomena. Mira, a researcher, maintained a low profile, earning both trust and skepticism. He communicated with Joe in simple terms, focusing on observation and measurement. One night, Joe noticed an intruder near his barn, prompting him to grab his shotgun. The figure fled, leaving Joe unsettled. The next morning, an art restorer arrived, claiming the helmet was a modern hoax. Mira challenged the claim, noting the absence of solid evidence. As the restorer left, Joe felt caught between doubt and the powerful feeling he'd had when he first uncovered the helmet, a conflict that stayed with him. Days settled into routine as he worked the fields, filling rows he had yet to plant. A week after the discovery, the university organized a public talk at the high school gym. Folding chairs filled the space, and the helmet stood on stage in a clear case. Mira gave a polished presentation, describing the metal as unusual and the carvings as both beautiful and hard to classify, suggesting it resisted cultural placement. When asked about its meaning, he admitted he didn't know, easing the crowd's expectations. Afterward, Joe spoke with attendees, explaining that finding it felt both ordinary in action and extraordinary in impact. When asked whether it was a message, he suggested that perhaps all things could be seen as messages. Joe's nights grew heavy with dreams of walking his fields and hearing a faint tapping. He debated what to do with the helmet, donate it, sell the story, or hide it again. Still, he kept tending his garden and helping neighbors. One morning, Eli Webster visited, sharing how a simple spoon once moved him to tears, reminding Joe that objects often carry the weight of those who held them. Viewing the helmet, Eli suggested it represented a question more than an answer. When the materials analysis returned, the report described a complex composition, with microstructures resembling spinodal decomposition, yet no signs of modern manufacturing. Ruth concluded that while some might call it fake, the truth was that no one really knew. Joe received offers from museums and media, but what touched him most was a student's drawing of the helmet with corn sprouting from its eye shape. He began taking the helmet to familiar places, schools, the library, letting people interact with it. At the county fair, it was informally dubbed the Kansas Helmet, a name that endured. When a British reporter asked what it meant for Kansas, Joe joked that the state had more than tornadoes. By month's end, he stood in his field at dawn, reflecting on the filled hole where he first found it. He realized he had never asked the simplest question, why here? He let the wind offer no reply. Though behind on planting in spring, he felt aligned with something unnamed. Seeing the helmet on his table later soothed him. He understood he controlled his choices but little else. Interest eventually faded. The university began a long-term study, sparking ongoing debate. Joe decided the helmet should stay at the local museum for a year, then travel but always return home. The town held a small celebration, and Joe resumed farming, watching the corn grow, the helmet no longer disturbing his days. He sometimes reflected on the carvings, the conversations, and the night with a shotgun. Visitors occasionally came to see the site, where he placed a bench for quiet reflection. He often visited the museum himself, accepting the helmet as a creation of unknown hands. A woman and her daughter thanked him for sharing it. At dusk, he returned to the field, recalling the moment he uncovered it. It had filled his life with questions and strangers, but he accepted it like weather or seed prices. The story he embraced was simple. The world held secrets, the ground kept them, and sometimes they revealed themselves to those present to see. This understanding sufficed for Joe. He focused on his work, knowing the sun remained impartial and the earth steady. The helmet became a companion rather than an answer, and he found peace in its presence. He listened for small, bright sounds, recognizing that wonder often arrived quietly, urging him to explore further. As the wind whispered through his field and the sun touched his shoulders, Joe felt the world lean closer, as if sharing a secret. He was ready to hear it.